Guys, you know who I told about my podcast? Sorry, have to train myself. Our podcast. My old friend Sebastian Stan. Have you heard of this guy?
Maybe. Sorry, I'm swooning right now. Well, what did you say?
No, but that's the blanket. You're losing consciousness.
She's feeling faint.
You think you're swooning, but it's just the blanket. Sebastian Stan. He's having a bit of a moment. He's doing a lot. He's Emmy nominated for his performance as Tommy Lee in Pam and Tommy, a starring role in Fresh on Hulu a little while ago. He's got 2 upcoming movies, one by the name of A Different Man. The other is an Apple original called Sharper, where he's playing alongside Julianne Moore. Also, I don't know if anybody is aware, I got this on Wikipedia, he plays someone by the name of Bucky Barnes in these little shoestring indie movies made by a company called Marvel. It's about a gang of crime fighters. I don't know. But finally, Sebastian and I first met on Gossip Girl, where he played Carter Bazin. Also, Sebastian grew up in Romania and Austria and moved to the States right before 8th grade. And he opens up about his experiences trying to fit in at a new school in a new country. You're going to love this conversation. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I just want to go on record and thank you so much for coming on, man. I know your time is limited. Let's just jump right in.
No worries.
From what I gather, you moved to the U.S. during this time of middle school, right? So I'm just curious, what was it like for you then, and maybe what is your relationship to it now, of what it was adjusting to a new culture, a new kind of schooling, all that comes with? Like,
all the first thing that I remember the most when you say that are Jenkos. Do you remember Jenkos?
The jeans?
Yes.
The big wide leg?
Yeah, the wide leg, the big pockets in the back. I remember that a lot. And then I remember music comes to mind a lot. Like MTV was still going on. And I remember always watching that when I came home from school. And Green Day, I was a big Green Day fan. Like Tool and Offspring, and like those bands. And then, but it was... Yeah, it was a little weird because I came to the U.S. when I was 12. It was 95. And, it took a second to kind of acclimate. I mean, I always felt kind of behind in a lot of ways. You remember American Pie?
Yeah.
I mean, the movie, yeah, of course.
Yes. So I remember there was a scene when I watched the movie. They were like fucking with the foreign exchange student or something. They were like, say this. And that kind of happened to me.
Really?
Yeah, it was an interesting time. My first grade in America was 8th grade. My stepdad, who I grew up with in those years, was the headmaster of the school. So
wow.
I really was pretty screwed because because no one would ever hang out with me.
Sebastian.
I had like 4 friends. One was a Bosnian exchange student. Then it was my friend Vincent. But I was sort of a kryptonite. I was because the headmaster's kid. You just didn't want to.
Wow.
But I also had 120 kids in my high school. So like my grade was 12 people.
Wow, small.
So the 11 others were like, yeah, no, he's the headmaster's kid. We get him.
I heard you say in an interview, Sebastian, that acting kind of gave you this nice respite because in the rest of your life, it was feeling kind of like you didn't know what to do, what to say, you were learning the language, but then in acting, you had somebody just tell you, do this, be this way, say this thing.
Yeah, well, I think because of the language barrier, like I wasn't like a very confident kid. Like I wasn't engaging, I wasn't the one going out there and kind of starting conversations and stuff. Like I guess, so that's probably what I refer to is more that, I didn't have to figure out like what the right thing to say was. I could just follow like a script.
Yeah, and then in the script, of course, everything is written for you. The only thing you can do spontaneously is how you feel, which is quite liberating, I think. Acting boiled down to its essence is a pretty profound thing. I mean, you don't always get there on camera necessarily, but I was also 12 when I was really digging into it. And
you were already working when you were that young?
Oh yeah, man. So you moved to America. I moved to LA, which was like moving to the America of America. Which is,
right.
I moved to. I was working. I was being cast already. I mean, I had an agent, a manager, all that stuff. I had my SAG card when I was 12.
Oh wow!
But what got you into acting?
Well, I was very lucky. I had my mom who was always very supportive. And then even when I was in Europe, she would take me to these like cattle call auditions when I was younger. And then I booked this one tiny job that really was not a great experience. It was like this weird Michael Haneke like TV show in Austria, and I just had like one scene in one episode or whatever, and I just hated it. And then after that, she just sort of like kind of like do what you really want to do. And then it wasn't really until I was 13, 14 in high school. I went to a small high school, so like we didn't have a lot of kids to, you know, play sports and then like do theater and all that. Like everybody was encouraged to do everything. So I ended up through a friend kind of like trying out for the school play. And then I went to like this acting camp, Stage Door Manor. And then that really kind of like became fun. And by that point I was 15. So it was all in high school, basically.
It happened pretty early, but did you ever have dreams of doing something different? Could there have been a different path for you?
Oh yeah, I loved astronomy and like space, and I still cool. To this day like get very weepy about space travel and stuff. Like
that's beautiful.
There's a trilogy of books that I was like, I remember being obsessed with. It was like Red Planet, Blue Planet, Green Planet. It was all about like how humans were going to colonize Mars. And I was obsessed with that. I just thought like the idea of like us like moving to another planet, like, I don't know. I get like a weird Zen thing about it.
Nav and Penn love talking about life on other planets. So
yeah,
on another podcast,
we'll invite you back for just like that.
Let's get pulled in right
now.
Exactly. Sebastian, we have a couple questions that we ask every guest. So one is if you can share about your first love or crush and first heartbreak, because for many people it is at that time.
Absolutely. I won't embarrass her. She's got a family now, I think. She's got children. But it was Stage Door Manor, you know, like this camp was this magical camp in the Catskills. It's still there. It's like, that's where I met my manager, who I've been with for 25 years plus or whatever. And it was this awesome like acting camp. And I met this girl there who I ended up losing my virginity to. But I was too scared to tell her that I was a virgin when it was happening, because I wanted her to feel that she was safe. That at least there was one person out of the two of us that knew what they were doing. But years later, I did tell her that I was a virgin too. And she was like, I knew. But anyway, I was like, oh, okay. But so it was really at that camp when I was 15. And what happened was, we met at this camp, and then she and I went back home, and then we kept in touch for an entire year of long distance, like sending VHS tapes, and you know, because there was no cell phone, like you would have to call the house and ask to speak to, and then we met again one other year at that camp, and she wanted to go to NYU, and I was going to go to NYU too. I talked my parents into coming with me to visit NYU at the same time that she was talked to her parents to visit NYU. And we stayed at this hotel called the Hilton Hotel. We told our parents that we needed money. I don't know how we did it, but we basically got our parents to give us money. And then we rented a hotel at the hotel room at the Time Hotel, which was in Times Square. And that's when we lost our virginity together.
Wow, an epic
Guess
story.
You really wanted to know that.
We said crush, but thank you.
Yes.
No, it sounds like this is your first love.
Yeah. So
that was 100%.
Which is distinct from a crush, but
I asked him love. I said love or crush. Pen.
Yeah.
That's a really significant experience.
Yeah, that is really significant.
And it lasted for a long time.
Was she also your first heartbreak?
What happened was 9/11 happened, and everybody in the city had just like was in another planet, you know, like everybody that had been there and experienced it, and even surrounding it, you'd feel it. But it was around that time, and it was actually a pretty mutual kind of, it was sad, but it was a pretty mutual, like we need to experience more things, you know.
So it's quite poignant.
But Penn, don't worry. I've heard a few times since. I mean, I've had a couple of daggers out of my heart I had to pull, even in the times that we knew each other. So
yeah, I'm not concerned.
Pretty sure you and I shared a nice New Year's Eve chat one time, didn't we? We've got a couple of daggers in our hearts.
Yeah.
By the way, in 2000, I don't know if Penn remembers this, but I mean, I don't know why he would. Like, I remember seeing you at auditions in Los Angeles when it was probably 2006 or something.
Wow. So this would have been right before Gossip Girl?
Before Gossip Girl, for sure. I remember seeing you like in LA when we were doing pilot season and like kind of like a weird, like some Warner Brothers, like, you know, network test or something.
Camp.
Warner Brothers camp. Yeah, Warner Brothers camp.
Do you remember your first impressions of each other on the set when you worked together on Gossip Girl?
Pen? I was traumatized to be on that set.
Really?
Wow. I was scared. Well, first of all, I knew Chase, right? So
yeah, you knew Chase well.
I did, but like otherwise, I didn't know anybody. I mean,
I don't know that you and I would have had scenes together much because your storyline didn't interact with mine.
I know, but you were very nice. But I was legitimately scared to be on that set because it was just Gossip Girl was everything. I mean, it was like I felt like it was like the new Sex and the City. I mean, that's how I always thought of it.
Yeah. Pen, recollections of Sebastian?
I recall that you were friends with Chase because Chase kind of had this tight-knit circle of like a handful of actors. And at this point, I guess you guys all lived. Sebastian, did you live in New York then? Where did you live? You lived in LA?
I did. I was living in New York. No, I was always in New York, yeah.
Yeah, and in that sense, I think you did have a bit of a different vibe from like an actor coming from LA. You tend towards a self-deprecation that was very charming because like you're like a very tall, handsome, talented individual, which are those markers that we just see being like this should equal confidence. But you had a different vibe to you. I was always charmed and always thought nothing but good things, really.
Oh, you're very kind.
I do
become the most awkward question ever.
Yeah.
Sitting here like, oh, God.
No, but really, man. I mean, really. Because I just remember you being like, there was just something very, very funny and charming about how, like, I don't know, just the kind of charisma you could exude, but also be extremely self-deprecating with like kind of like a very interesting hard edge on yourself, which I know, you know, can translate into as an actor turning that hard edge into characters who turn hard edges on other people. You know what I mean? But like I didn't ever see you turn that on anyone else. It's just like it was like interesting. I always wanted to know more about you.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
That's why we brought you on this podcast. So wish fulfillment for Pen.
Yeah.
When you used to go to auditions, like I'll say this, like I feel like, I don't know, like were you a person that like just was like, I'm going to ignore everyone that's here and just focus on my thing and then pay attention? I happen to always kind of like, for some reason, I'm so freaked out by everyone else that I was like, I might as well just pay attention to what's going on. And so that maybe, I don't know. But some people are very like, no one's going to bother me, you know?
You know, to be honest, I'd been doing it already for 10 years. So I was, in my mind, I was about to check out. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
I'd been on like 4 failed series. I was honestly thinking about just playing music and getting a job as a waiter as Gossip Girl came around. And I was pretty disillusioned with especially the audition process. Auditions for me then, and they continue now, when I do have them, it's my least favorite part of the entire apparatus of what we do. And there's a lot to what we do that can be less than what you want to do, you know? I'm actually not an inherently competitive person, but I saw everyone just as competition, you know, as like, just,
of course,
it's so terrifying. It's
the
just
worst.
like it really is actually like the worst because all you're doing is looking at every other guy there who's literally made to be like you because you're all going for the same role, you know, and it's really like, oh, that's not what I'm like. Yep, he's like that, not like me. That's cool.
Or it's like, then you go the opposite where you're like, I'll just be friends with everyone. And then it won't feel as bad if like one of them will get it, you know?
Yeah.
So one other question that we always ask everyone is like an embarrassing story from your youth, if you remember any.
Oh my God. I mean, I've had a couple of embarrassing moments. Like I used to work at a movie theater, right? Like my junior and senior year of high school, I worked at this movie theater in Congress, New York. It's called Cinema 6. And like I was the usher and it was sort of like a really great thing because you would Friday, Saturday night, you'd be there for, the rated R movies. But I remember many times like being embarrassed. I think at one point I think I asked for a girl's number or something like while I was working there, and it didn't go very well. I was like, "You can have free popcorn."
Let me sweeten the deal.
Bartering.
Yeah.
What I feel like I'm finally recalling in my mid-30s, I just always felt this compulsion to be older, You really feel like you need to mature. I mean, even as you said before, like you're trying to tell your girlfriend that you're not a virgin because somehow we all feel that we need to be in more control than we are. We need, we're constantly making these projections because we're actually all so kind of like sweet and silly and insecure on the inside to a degree. And there's just, I just like, there's not a lot of acceptance in young people of like, hey, this is actually a nice time to be that way. You have plenty of the rest of life to be quite serious and do your taxes and raise children if, and it's a curiosity I think we're exploring on this show is like what characterizes this time of life and why can it be so uniquely painful and yet we always remember it with such like syrupy, sweet nostalgia, even though it often at the time is like all you wanted was to just get on with it,
Well, I think it's a really, and again, looking at today's world, I mean, with social media, it's like, it must be so confusing. You're already looking at your peers for acceptance and you're looking at them for guidance and you're afraid, like you said, to sort of own your own truth because you feel like you're going to be backed into a corner, you're going to be, cast out. And now you've got this sort of social media thing, which must be so confusing for people because how often it conflicts with how they really feel. Consumerism in America, capitalizes so much on this particular age group for so many things,
they're preyed on.
So
basically.
If you're a teenager and you're listening to this, like I would say, like count yourself and give yourself more credit here. Like everyone's after you to sell you something, to take over what you want, because you're passionate. You're young enough at that point where you're going like, I feel this, I feel this. And then tomorrow you might feel differently. And then it's emotions and you're going up and down. You're trying to understand what they are. And then like you've got all these things kind of trying to capitalize on that. And that makes me kind of sad because it's like, I mean, if you think about having kids one day, you want to be able to like steer them the right way. And when they get to that age group, you fear that it's like, oh my God, they're going to have to just, navigate over these hoops that society's throwing at them nonstop.
Yeah, that really resonates. I was just thinking yesterday, I like finally got on TikTok. I haven't had it for all this time. And I was like, scrolling, whatever. And I just felt really sad. I feel like in our society, there's no longer space for stillness. It's like stimulus, stimulus, stimulus. And young people themselves are like now the product. Like they sometimes commodify themselves, I think not knowing that that's what's happening. And, these platforms sell your data to other companies. So like you are the commodity. Like you are the product that's being sold. And there's like 12-year-olds on these platforms.
And now a word from our sponsor.
TikTok.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, I actually, by the way, I don't say this as like a weird like attention to myself, but I did turn 40 like last week, and it's
happy birthday, congratulations,
40, and so it's like it's interesting when you're 40, you start to kind of like the bullshit really starts to kind of drain out. Now I kind of get to sort of start over in a lot of ways. One of the things I said to myself, I was like, I basically have limited now. I maybe open Instagram like once, twice a week at this point.
Wow.
I don't even know what that application does for me anymore. Like, I think the point was, bringing attention to certain voices and certain kind of charities or certain kind of purposes that don't get the same attention. And for that, I'll stay on. Like, I'll try and figure out a way to kind of like, partner there and to keep making it for that. But outside of that, like, you're right. Like, I don't have TikTok, but, I open the thing and, it just ends up being sort of wasted time. People have to be really careful. I just read somewhere that there was these lawsuits, like, because there's the suicide rate and there's all these things like parents are afraid of. And I'm not surprised because I don't think these companies are really factoring any of that in.
No, I mean,
they don't care about you.
We know that they're not.
We know they're not.
We know that their profit is their motive. Like that's not even, that's an objective truth that we have to just contend with.
The one thing that I do think is positive about TikTok, about social media, is that it does feel like people who have stories to tell, people who have talent, there is opportunity for them to share those stories with a wider audience, which I think is really special. We have a house guest right now, and she grew up in Iran and then moved to Australia when she was like a preteen as a refugee. And she was telling me that she watched this one movie over and over again because it's about this Italian girl who moved to Australia. And that was the closest thing to her own experience. It was the first piece of media she had seen where there was a girl who was not from Australia trying to navigate being in Australia. And I was just thinking, like, how sad that that's the only piece of media that you had, and still how much of an impact it had on her. And how today, like, there is a Muslim girl wearing a hijab on TikTok who's hilarious, telling her story. You know, there's many of them telling their stories. And there are many more opportunities for people to connect with those stories, no matter how niche their experience is. You know, they don't have to be white. They don't have to be straight. They don't have to be whatever, list all the majority groups.
I think like the way that people use it, like part of the ways that people use it can be really positive. The challenge is that the platforms are based on an addiction model. I mean, that's like studied, proven. But I think I've probably even mentioned this on a previous episode, but I think maybe it got edited out, so I can say it again. There was like a week where...
we'll edit it out again, don't worry.
Yeah. We'll just keep cutting this tidbit. There was like a week where Instagram, which is owned by Meta, Facebook, had they had like received the results of a long longitudinal study of the impacts of the platform on young people. And it was basically, I don't remember the exact details, so we'll have to fact check this, but it was like if young people spent more than an hour or 2 hours a day, it had very real consequences on their mental health. It was proven that it was damaging. And that same week, Instagram had an internal mandate to try to keep young people on the platform for like 3 hours a day. And so like they knew that that would cause mental health issues, and they were like losing young people to TikTok. So they had an internal mandate to like, how do we keep them on longer? So to me, that's evil. That's just like plain evil. Like you have the information and you're doing something really evil with it because you need money, you know? And so it's an addiction model. It's a profit model.
Need money. Want.
You want money.
Want money.
Yeah.
So there are wonderful things happening on the platform, and the creators of the platform are making you addicted.
Yes,
They're just
I'm glad you
building
said that.
in.
Especially like you're talking about these teenage years, like they're so incredible in a way. And I actually feel like when you're a teenager, you don't get to enjoy them.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's like this wonderful time deep down where you get to really find out about yourself and what you want, what you like.
Yeah, no, I mean, my stepson is 13, and, it's interesting being a parent of someone that age because, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, there's a plasticity and a resilience that somehow also characterizes this period where it can be so tough, but you almost like don't have anything else to compare it to. So you're just kind of like, you're in the trenches of it, you're in the weeds of it, the aspects of it that are hard, and you kind of just like get by better than maybe adults would be faring with that level of, I don't know, like volatility. I see kids that age as being quite brave. And as you said before, by the way, the background here on Nava and Sophie. Sophie used to be a fifth grade teacher. Nava used to be a middle school director, and then also worked at the UN researching the effects of media on youth as one aspect of her work. So that's part of why they're here, so that I'm not just rambling about a bunch of nonsense. But it's a time that requires courage, and just being is courageous.
I was telling Penn and Sophie that I took a generous amount of work time this week to watch a lot of your like films to sort of prepare. So I watched Fresh. Believe it or not. And I was telling them that you I mean, who am I to like give you a compliment? Everybody knows that you're incredible, but you are such a chameleon. That's what I couldn't get over. It was like you didn't feel like the same person in each film. I felt like you were really lost in each role. And I was honestly blown away. And especially your performance in Pam and Tommy. Like, I understand why you're nominated for the Emmy. It's incrable. So I don't know how you would know this, but like, how do you do that? Like, how do you lose yourself so much in each role?
I worked hard. I definitely don't want to minimize that. Quarantine really helped me in a way, like specifically with Fresh. And then also Pam and Tommy, like fresh, I had these 2 weeks in Canada where I couldn't leave the apartment I was in. And then all I was doing was just like working on it nonstop. And the focus of that really taught me like, oh, you know, you don't always get the same chance because you have family, you have things, life and stuff pulling at you. But that time was really helped me out. And then similarly with, you know, I had another sort of couple weeks before we started, right after that, before we started the Pam and Tommy show. And all I was doing was just morning till night. And I think, you know, it was an interesting learning lesson, but yeah, I don't know.
In both Fresh and Tommy, you have these moments where you like have like freakouts, you know, like violent scenes or aggressive scenes, and like you're like really like fully like screaming. It's like a full body performance. And I was just wondering, how is that for you as an actor? Like, what impact does that have on you, Sebastian the person, having to embody those like really extreme, intense moments?
I don't know. It's like weirdly, I don't. Like, you can't think about it in the moment. Like, it's like a bizarre thing that happens because with every job, you sort of have a couple of those days where you know they're coming and you mark them on the calendar and you're like, oh God, like this day I'm going to have to like cry, or like this day it's going to have to be whatever crazy. And you kind of just pace yourself as you get closer and closer to those days. But the truth is, on those days, you just sort of have to kind of just say, fuck it, and like, go there, I guess. And I find that the more I've kind of like analyzed it or something, the more I have a harder time getting there. So I just sort of feel the sort of like the call and the pressure in the moment to be like, well, this has to happen now. And like, you know, then it will just go there. But I've noticed that it also helps when you have the right support system, the right people that you can feel comfortable with, a director who can kind of hold your hand as you're starting to overthink everything. And then if it's the right earned moment because the script has built up to that, then you have confidence that you're not sort of like overdoing it or anything like that. You know, you're just, you're like, okay, like this is required of me now. And I've earned this moment. I can go there. I'm okay, you know?
I read a quote where Lily James was saying that scene where all the lawyers in the room are like disregarding her and being rude to her, that she, the person, had a hard time distinguishing it. Like her body didn't know the difference between like Pam and Lily. And I was just wondering, as like playing an aggressor, and I've asked Penn this question privately, like playing an aggressor, does your body know the difference? Like, does that stir up any feelings for you?
I think you asked on another podcast.
Oh, did I?
That's okay.
Yeah. Like,
Not privately.
I was like, I was there for sure.
Just kidding.
You know, I remember I was looking at your show, and like you've explored all those sort of complexities of someone who has these obsessive tendencies, but then like, you know, they're human too. And but I would say that your nervous system ultimately doesn't really know that it's not real. Like it can't. Like it's just, you know, it's just reacting. And you know, I think you always sort of have to, you know, there's a bird's eye view of the situation that has to be there to be like, you know, it's like meditating. I don't know if anybody meditates here or whatever, but like when you meditate, they say you're watching yourself in the experience. And I think there has to be something like that so that you can still measure it out. Because otherwise it just becomes like all over the place.
It's like, it's this balance between somehow letting this nervous process take over you while having enough of a rational mind left over, an analytical mind to be. It's a very, very strange like threshold to straddle multiple hours a day.
I've learned like if you go, you know, once you go home, I think sometimes it really does help to do the opposite, you know, and I think it does help sort of, you know, your friends, your family, like you kind of have to have those things that can always anchor you in a way.
All right, we have a final question. Penn, do you want to ask it?
Yeah. If you could go back and give one piece of advice, say or do anything for 12-year-old Sebastian, what would it be?
Oh my God. It's always about self-doubt, right? There are many things I doubted myself on and tortured myself to no end for that I later on realized I didn't have to. And I guess like if anything, I would pass on would be to ask yourself whether this here problem is really a problem, or is it just, it's okay, you know, like maybe you are just the way you are, and that's okay, and that doesn't have to be like everybody else. And you know, like I heard this great thing recently on a podcast. It talks about like the difference between cows and bulls in a storm, and apparently cows run away from the storm, but bulls actually charge into it. And I just was like, that's it. Like, be a fucking bull. Like, charge into it. Like, you have to charge into the storm. Don't run away from it because it's coming anyway. So you might as well get into it sooner than later, you know, and then you'll figure out a way out.
I love that.
Are those the only two options?
Could we get together with the other cows and figure out a way to handle the storm?
To handle the storm? Yeah.
Sebastian, this was so great. Thank you so much for your time.
Listen, thank you for having me. It's so nice to see you again, Pat. It's been a long time, but you look just as young as you always did. All the best, and don't be a stranger. And so nice to meet you guys, and thanks for having me.
So nice to meet you,
Sebastian.